Welcome to the February 2022 news and discussion episode of the And Now for Something Completely Machinima podcast.
Yes.
I'm one of the podcast regular hosts. I'm Tracy Harwood, and I'm joined today by Ricky Grove.
Hello.
Phil Rice.
Hey there.
And Damien Valentine.
Hello there.
Hi. Great to see you guys. Now, we've each got a bunch of news items for you this month, and we've also got some things that a few of you who have contacted us wanted us to talk about too, which we'll come on to as we go through today's updates. So thanks for that feedback and keep it coming in.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, there's some really great points being made, actually. First of all, we've got some news items, though. So let's start with Damien's overview of Nvidia's special address at the Consumer Electronics Show, which took place on the 4th of January. So, Damien, what's your update on that?
So Nvidia, we've been following them very closely because obviously the graphics cards are very important for people making machinima. And, of course, Omniverse is a platform that we've been following quite closely over the last few months. So in January, they had this presentation where they're going to give an update on what's coming next. So the first things they announced was a 3050 graphics card. So there's another RTX one. It's more of a low budget one. It should be available. I say should be available. I don't know what the stock levels are actually going to be, but it's been released as you listen to this. It could be as hard to find as all the others have been so far. And of course, there's the 3090 Ti, which was announced, but at the time of recording, they haven't given a release date or a price. I imagine the price is going to be astronomically high because the 3090s already are massively expensive. So the Ti one's going to be a lot more than that. But so far, no details have come for that. They've announced a whole new range of RTX-powered laptops, and they showed some of those off. I don't know if those are only going to be any good for people making machinima, because obviously a desktop computer is going to be a lot more powerful than a laptop. This is something I think Phil would be better off talking about than me. That's more his area. But it was available. They've been reaching out with all these laptop manufacturers, and there's a lot out there to have a look at if that is the direction you want to go in. The big news for Omniverse is it's now out of beta. It's freely available to anyone to use. So if you want to check that out, you can go to the Omniverse website and download it and see what you can do with it. There's no new features added since they released that, at least as far as we're recording this. There's still a lot more that they're working on for the software, which is it's very powerful in what you can do with it now. So more features coming, that's going to be really good to see. But again, they didn't really elaborate on that. It's more about it's out of beta and now available to everyone rather than having to sign up for it. Canvas has been updated. This is the piece of software that I talked about last month, where you draw a little picture and then it comes up with this AI generated masterpiece. They've made some improvements to that, so the images that you get at the end result are much more higher resolution. There's more template styles to choose from, and there's more features there to play around with, which unfortunately I haven't had time to do just yet. And that kind of covered all of the everything related to machinima. But they also, I just mention this briefly, they also announced that they're doing AI-driven cars, so that they're self-driving cars. The reason I mention this is they're using Omniverse to train the AI how to avoid objects. And I was actually tuned out of the presentation at this point. I was cooking at the same time, so I missed the beginning of that. But it sounds like they're using it. It must be the physics and the way the objects handle. So they put the AI through this process in their own virtual environment software to teach it how to avoid things. And I thought that's really impressive. And that's not something that you expect to get out of software design for making machinima.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they didn't really elaborate more beyond that. It kind of took me by surprise. And I thought, well, that's worth mentioning, even if it's not directly related to machinima.
Right. And there's hope for clumsy people in the future because they can actually figure out how to put it in clumsy people's brains. They could avoid many clumsy problems of dropped plates and, planters being knocked over, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So that's my coverage of the Nvidia presentation. Especially more graphics cards in the 30 range, laptops, and the Omniverse is out of beta.
A couple of things struck me about it. I mean, firstly, the premise on which they made that presentation was really quite interesting, because one of the things that they commented on was the number of creators, which they indicated was 45 million and growing. Now, I wonder what they actually meant by that, because it was at least 10 years ago. I recall having a look at some of the figures, which suggested that about a third of the world were doing creative stuff at that point. So what do you think they're talking about? Is this kind of like purely real-time and machinima they're talking about?
No, I think they're talking about people who are collaborating and using the platform.
Just purely their platform?
Yeah.
That's really interesting then. Then the other thing that they said, which I also thought was quite interesting, and which to me, well, this was the rationale that I thought they gave for the development of the kit in the way that they had, was the development in esports. And the reason they said that they were focusing on that was because of the competitive environment, where speed of gameplay is the difference between winning and losing. But of course, a microsecond is much less of a concern to creatives, such as machinima makers. And quite frankly, there were relatively few folks in the world that are actually doing competitive gaming. Lots viewing it, but not that many teams participating. Although I understand, we all know, there's a huge amount of money floating about in that space. So beyond improving the game experience, this emphasis on kit, I think, is nothing to do really with creatives as such, and much more to do with AI developments that we've heard them talk about. Which kind of...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it kind of raises an interesting matter, which is really how creative, and this is where I think it's going, this is why I think it's important to machinimators. It kind of links together more of the creative and the industrial processes, which I think are kind of now beginning to align. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I've always said that there are many, many more applications of real-time and machinima than purely entertainment and filmmaking, such as for visualizing no problem, just about any service scenario. And I did some work, I don't know, 7-8 years ago now, which I've published some papers in, with the help of Chantel Harvey, who did all the machinima work for me, where we kind of visualized new service environments. So I think, I think that's quite an interesting development, that they're creating this kit, giving one rationale for its development, and yet probably there's a different story to its real application to do with machinima creators.
Yeah, you covered exactly what I was going to add to that. The very first time I got involved with Omniverse, I had a meeting with a couple people, and because they were trying to help me get Omniverse to work on my system, I was having trouble, and they were talking about it being originally it was an in-house collaborative application, and they thought that they could bring this to professionals. They could do several things at once. They could provide an easy way for people to collaborate in real time on projects like designing a car, engineering a product, working on a 3D model for small team games. And in addition to that, they could promote their own applications inside of it. So you would have the cross-platform promotion at the same time, which I was very happy that when they brought out the the first public version of it, the 1.0 version as out of the beta, they didn't charge for it. I was really happy about that because that means that they are serious about making it a collaborative platform. And you see the trend in many other different companies where you have to download a single application in order to organize all of your assets and everything. Well, Nvidia has that idea, but it's much larger. And I think
Mm.
that's what they're talking about when they're talking about creative um, people doing creative projects. It's that collaboration inside using ray trace materials and all of that inside of the NVIDIA Omniverse environment.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing, which I thought was incredibly interesting too, was this idea of focusing on cloud-based game and support infrastructure,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which really meant that even if you've got a laggy old computer, you could still participate in this world. And I think that's also, that to me was a very interesting set of developments too,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it really does put the tools in everybody's hands,
Yeah. Well,
irrespective of whether you can afford the kit or not.
yeah, I agree. I think one thing I like about the game world and the graphics technology world is that they're not wholeheartedly embracing open source technology, but they're moving in that direction.
Mm.
You see Epic Games creating grants for creators, making free technology available. Unreal is still free. NVIDIA is moving in that direction in an idea of giving back to the community while still promoting their project
Mm.
because they've made so much money. I mean, Epic has made so much money, NVIDIA has made so much money, they want to give some of it back. And I think that's a true thing. And I mean, if you know, NVIDIA joined the Blender group to donate to Blender. Epic has done the same thing. Real Illusion did that
Mm.
just recently, joined the Blender Foundation. So that trend is also ongoing, and I'm really happy to see it.
Yeah, all of that sounds great. From my point of view, I think the only thing we really lack now, with all of this infrastructure, developing at a pace which it clearly is a good means to find and access those kind of indie studios. Because let's face it, none of those current sharing platforms, such as Facebook or LinkedIn, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, Patreon, none of them are a good way to share your creative work. Not
Mm,
least because that discovery um, element, that need to sort of find the stuff, is still a function of an algorithm that is prioritizing ad revenue for that
yeah,
platform owner.
yeah, you're right.
And
Yeah,
it's, there's nothing out there really which supports creatives other than those platforms. There's got to be something better than that. So
yeah.
roll on that, somebody, please.
That'd be nice.
Hmm.
Good report, Damien. Thank you.
Yeah,
The other
absolutely.
the other thing I found, which I'm going to mention briefly, is a meme that was going around, and I tried to find out if this is true or not, and I really hope it is. Is a news station has this contest where they ask people in the local area to submit photos, and this girl had been submitting screenshots from Red Dead Redemption
Oh,
uh,
yes.
to the news station, and they'd been posting those pictures thinking that they were real photos and not screenshots from the game.
I
Understandable.
read.
It's a
I read
cracking
that too. I had
environment.
to laugh.
Yeah, wonderful. I hope it's true.
Yeah,
Now, Ricky,
that's it for me.
thank you very much, Damon. Ricky, you've got a ton of stuff for us as well. What do you have to tell us?
Well, I'll try to keep it brief. The first thing is if you're a filmmaker, machinima filmmaker, and you want to submit your film to a film festival, the Austin Film Festival has opened their competition to animated shorts. So take a look at it. We'll put the link in the show notes, or you can just do Austin Film Festival. The early bird deadline is March 25th. The regular deadline is May 16th, and the late deadline is June 24th. Now, remember, this is a pay to play, so you're going to spend about $50 to submit your film. But if that's not a problem for you, I recommend it. Austin Film Festival is a well-regarded film festival, and I think you do well. Secondly, Adobe is testing out a new web-based tool that uses AI to simplify audio recording. It's called Project Shasta. It could make recording and editing podcasts and other projects a lot easier. In a sense, you can set up a time where you can record together. So far, I haven't heard that it's a paying platform yet, but I'll get more information on that. We'll put a link in the show notes, or you can just do Google search Project Shasta. It looks interesting. And then, secondly, Or thirdly, the Kerbal Space Program 2 is launching somewhere in 2022. Kerbal Space Program originally started in 2015. It was a Mexican company, and it was purchased by Take-Two Interactive. It's a great space construction, open space construction game with absolutely gorgeous spaceships, space, platforms, all kinds of stuff. The game action is basically working together with your friends who play these little fun characters in spacesuits and that to design and create space stations for assignments and rocket launch. It was hugely successful. And Kerbal Space Program 2 looks even better. They've taken a lot of feedback from users. They've updated it. It looks better. They've given you more opportunities. YouTube has a lot of interesting Kerbal Space Program Machinima, which I like. I think it's a great platform for Machinima. It's something I'm going to keep looking at through the rest of the year as the open space programs for Machinima. So keep an eye on Kerbal Space Program 2. They say 2022, but they don't say what quarter. So I'm not sure which one to look at, but we'll keep you updated on it. And lastly, I have to say, it's not really news; it's more of an observation. When we first started this podcast, I would every week comb the internet and comb YouTube and Vimeo and all the other places to try to find interesting machinima, and I wasn't always successful. So I ended up going back and doing a couple classics. Well, I have to say, I don't know why, but there just seems to be a greater percentage of really good machinima on YouTube in particular now. I went through several different searches this week and came across at least half a dozen films I could add to our film list, but I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to burden everybody. But I'll add the links in our show notes so you can follow through. And so I'm really happy about that. There's some really good stuff being done, not only finally in Unity and Unreal too, but that's a real encouraging sign to me, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, it could be the lockdown coming to fruition.
Yes, indeed.
Sort of the last 2 years worth of work just now coming out. Because I noticed a lot coming out in December as well, which I thought was quite interesting. You know, the fact that there were so many being released during December.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got a few updates myself.
All right.
Which I'll run past you all. Firstly, just a sort of a general point, general observation, really, which was made by Upload VR in an article that I just sort of came across, which was the increase in sales of VR headsets over the Christmas period. And from what I could see, that's an increase of around threefold from what I can tell across the different platforms reported on. There are no official release figures for VR headset sales, which I think is one of the challenges for that sector. I think one of the main problems with VR has been that there hasn't really been enough killer apps to justify the investment in the kit. And quite frankly, it's still a pain in the bum to use it. Plus, if you're going to make content for it or from it, the VR games themselves are quite a challenge, as we kind of found out when we talked to Half-Life Peeps, when he did that a film series, Alex, a few months back when we talked to him. He was saying what a challenge it is to create machinima in VR. So much of this is going to be driven by the metaverse hype, I think. The fact that, VR kit is going to be adopted through all this talk going around on what the impact of the metaverse is. And the article itself suggests that one of the main drivers is Meta, Facebook. And of course, that's gone on and on and on, and most of it isn't really very positive. So I think it'll be quite interesting to see how VR does continue to evolve as a machinima creating tool or resource over the coming months as more and more content gets made in that environment. And maybe we've reached a critical mass of adopters now. I'm not sure. So that was one point I wanted to make. The other is to do with NFTs. Now, we've talked about NFTs in the past.
Boo! Boo!
Exactly. Well, I got two comments on this. Firstly, Peter Molyneux, whom you'll recall, had made that well-loved Machinima game, The Movies, which was released back in 2005, is now, it turns out, working on a business open-world sim where creators can earn money from their creative work using blockchain technology. So think Minecraft and Second Life. And in Molyneux's game, you can already buy land. And once the game releases, which is scheduled to be later this year, you'll be able to own your own assets as well in after you've kind of created them. So you own them, continue to take a stake out of them. Although I think it sounds a little different to, from what I understand of it, it sounds a little different to sort of what you do with Second Life, because you continue to earn money from them using this cryptocurrency setup, which they've called legacy. So it implies that you continue to generate revenue from it. I think that's going to be quite an interesting one to watch, not least because it's it's still rolling on with this NFTs that we haven't really kind of bottomed out. That said, the second thing on NFTs that we picked up this last couple of weeks it's sounding really quite interesting, and that's that John Gator of the Matrix Bullet Time infamy has also created some real-time machinima content which evokes the Matrix experience that he's now listed on an NFT market. And these are not just films, but they're snapshots of a virtual experience with eggs embedded into them that buyers can find for themselves. So it's kind of like a mini Matrix Awakens like experience with specific content and sold whatever that market rate will bear, what the exchange determines. Now, they're listed on OpenSea at the moment, although I couldn't actually see much trading taking place on the works, and neither is it clear whether the pieces on the market have been made using parts from Matrix Awakens experience, say the cutouts, or to my point earlier, really about VR. Are they bits and pieces that he's made himself, and can he make can you, I suppose, can you collect them really? I think a lot of this depends on the viability of the content itself. Now, of course, we know that the Matrix has at least in theory got a pretty wide audience, but I think the other part of it depends on the name of the artist, which of course John
Right.
John is a name.
Right.
So I think he's onto something in terms of the concept here, but whether other machinima creators can do a similar thing, like create part of their film in, say, an Unreal like an Unreal frame, or part of the story, if you like, and then try and sell that as an experience. I think that might be one option that they're kind of thinking may look viable. But I think if all you're doing is using Unreal to create your own films and then putting your films out there, I think that's doing something else, and I'm not sure that will be viable in this NFT kind of market context that he's
Good
clearly
point.
developing. So I think that's a really interesting development in machinima and NFTs. I mean, we always kind of knew that there would be that. Interesting that John Gator is one of the first to jump into that, onto that bandwagon.
I agree.
Okay, so another bit of news. Philip Rosedale is now back at Second Life.
Yeah, what the hell happened there? What's going on?
That is incredible. So I think it's really exciting for those creators working in Second Life, but also something of great interest to other metaverse creators. Because, of course, Philip was one of the founders in creating the first sort of viable metaverse environment, Second Life, which most folks seem to have forgotten in this kind of hyped up world about talking about it. Now, it's not actually him working for Second Life. What's actually happened here, from what I understand, is that his company, which is High Fidelity, which is, as we know, a VR focused startup, has basically merged with Linden Labs. And as part of that merger, Philip is now doing some strategic consultancy with the Linden Labs team. And it not just brings in Philip, but a load of the other High Fidelity team members as well. So it's a really interesting development, I think.
What do you think we can expect from his involvement at Second Life?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting to see. Well, what he's been working on is spatial audio in recent years. I mean, we had a dabble around with that very early
Right,
last year, if
right.
you remember.
Yeah.
I think the VR side of things might have something to add to this too. We
Mm-hmm.
know that Philip dabbled around with, some of the very early, what was the Oculus Rift, wasn't it? The very early Rift headset
Right.
was compatible with Second Life all those years ago. I remember investing in one of those and having a go with it all that time back. So maybe we can see a bit more out of this. I don't know. What do you guys think might come out of that?
I'm not sure, since he's on a consulting basis. The ability of him to have influence might be limited. Their biggest problem has been the technical side of their organization, not so much the content side, because it's filled with all sorts of interesting creators, but it's always had streaming problems. It's always had resolution problems. It's had animation issues. Um,
Mm,
so I don't think he's going to be able to affect any changes there, because that sort of heavy lifting architecture that they have to work on, and they just haven't spent the money to do that.
mm. Good point. Really good point. I think one of the things that they have got, though, which many other organizations haven't, is the virtual currency side of things.
Hmm.
They've got that stitched up well and truly, and have had for years. And I think they'll draw a lot on that experience.
I
Because
have to say, I'm dubious of organizations that are creative. They're focused on creative uh, artists and also their creations, suddenly in getting themselves involved in money making. I think there's a something changes when you start doing things for money.
yeah, but
It's one of the reasons.
I don't think they're doing it for the money, are they? I don't see them in that way. All I was saying
Well,
was,
then why are they adding the NF? For example, the fellow doing the NFTs, and you could uh, put your projects out there in order to get profit from NFTs.
yeah, okay, well, that's not in Second Life.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's
I
not.
guess I'm mixing up my stories. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. It's not a problem. No, I don't think Second Life are in the NFT world, but they do have an exchange rate, an exchange currency, don't they?
Yeah,
Linden dollars.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I guess it's just in general, any organization that is creative focused, as soon as money comes into the picture, it changes people's motives. And it also brings in a marketplace attitude. For example, in an NFT marketplace, you look at what's sold, and then you start pushing your creations towards what's sold as opposed to what you want to create. You know what I mean? And that's always been a frustration for me. So that's just a general comment on that, because I was always happy about Machinima because it wasn't about money. When you got involved, I remember when I first got involved in Machinima and people wanted me to act in their uh, shows, and if I liked the script, I would. And they'd say, "Well, hey, let me send you $100 or let me send you $50 for this," and I would never take it,
hmm,
because as soon as you have money involved in it, there's a sort of obligation on the other side.
yeah,
If they're paying you, then you have to perform a function. Whereas if there's no money involved in it, it's based on your good word. It's based on your faith in working with that other person for a different end. That's just a general observation on it. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm half cocked. We'll
No,
see.
I think you're right, Ricky. And honestly, I mean, Second Life has long had, excuse me, long had a the currency that's been around for a long time. The marketplace, people able to sell what they create, and that does introduce market dynamics in terms of if you want to make money on that platform, you are going to study what are other people having success selling. But that money making aspect of it is amongst the users more so than it is Linden. Yeah, they kind of play the role of the federal government, if you will, and they regulate the currency and make certain decisions and all that. But I don't think that anybody at the top of Second Life is not doing what they're doing with it for money. And that's either fortunate or it's just a reality of the world. I don't know, but I mean, if you look at the way, so I've done a little bit of experimenting with affiliate marketing over the years, which is where you can sign up to, host the ads or things like that for certain products on a website that you run, and then you can make a percentage off of sales and things like that. And when you join an affiliate program, the vendor, the product provider, provides you with marketing collateral to use, banner ads and all that. And basically it kind of conveys, here's the emphasis of what we want you to emphasize when you're selling this as a product. Well, Second Life participates in that and has for years. And if you look through their marketing collateral, every single banner image that they want you to host on their site with the Second Life logo on it, every single one is one of two subject matters. Either advertising the idea of having a virtual pet. So it'll be, an avatar there with a dog, and, you could have a virtual pet that won't actually poop in your house or something to that effect, I guess is the benefit of that. Or two scantily clad couple posing together in, okay, it's not Kama Sutra or anything, but it's, laying around the spa, or something, romance, basically. Like it's basically the Second Life equivalent of the cover of a Harlequin romance novel, if you remember those. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's how they have been encouraging affiliates across the globe to promote Second Life. Which is a very different understanding of, so basically that turns Second Life into a, Tinder with graphics, if you will, Well, that's not what the people that I've known over the years who have gotten excited about Second Life, and who promote Second Life and who do a lot of things in Second Life. And we could name dozens. I'm not going to try to start naming people. We'll leave people out. There's so many. That's never what they talk about as the plus. It's these very deeply, creating 3D experiences for someone, and using it for machinima is just one thing. But there's people who, I don't want to make a movie of this. I want to create a place in this virtual world and have people come experience it in Second Life, not outside on YouTube, right in here where it's all around you, where there's not really a set camera. You're the camera. What you look at is what you look at, like an augmented reality experience in real life in there. So that's what creators that know about Second Life love about Second Life. Mm-hmm. Not that I might find a date, So to some degree, I would say what I would hope for the, let's say, powers that be at Second Life is that they kind of really take some serious stock of what kind of image do we want to create for this place? Because it seems like marketing wise, the emphasis has been on, people who come in there for some kind of, enhanced dating experience of some kind. And maybe that's because some study that they did said, hey, you know what? Our longest term subscribers, that's what they're there for. So that's where we make the money. And so let's attract more of that. That's a marketer's approach, or a salesperson's approach.
Right.
But if they really want it to be a metaverse experience, my God, I hope the metaverse ends up being more than just that. I don't want Ashley Madison with graphics. Okay. I don't want it to be a place that if I go there, my wife wonders if I'm having an affair, It shouldn't be that, but that's kind of the reputation that Linden themselves have encouraged promotion of it to be used for that.
If it's because over the last 2 years, there's been a great emphasis on virtual dating with all the dating apps have gone to virtual dates because obviously
That's
it's not been
probably
safe to
true,
meet up.
Damien. Yeah.
So they're getting in on that, trying to
But
think that's a good way to
their
lure it in.
emphasis on it goes back further than the past 2 years.
Oh,
This is
okay.
not this is
Definitely
not
does,
something
yeah.
that they shifted to post COVID. They were already promoting it that way.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So,
But
and really,
still,
I don't remember exactly when Philip left there, Tracy, but I think it's
Oh.
all since he departed. I don't know if there's any cause effect there or not, but
Be 2013-ish, I think.
yeah.
When
We're
Eddie
talking
stepped
about.
in.
I first noticed it about 5 years ago. So,
Oh, I think it goes back right almost to the beginning of it. What you're talking
Yeah.
about, definitely.
Yeah.
There was
But
always
what do
these
you-
two different
And
worlds.
I get that that's an attractive part of it for some people, but I'm saying if really what they're looking at is, well, we want to create this place that people are going to take seriously for, like what we did, Ricky, with the Machinima Expo.
right.
If we had thought of Second Life as just a virtual dating platform, I don't think we would have even considered it as a venue. But
Not
we
even
knew
remotely.
we knew Second Life was more than that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I guess we discovered that by using it. But if they're wanting to attract and regrow their user base, I think that they need to, their marketing strategy needs to
change.
reflect who it is they want in there, and not just people who, hey, I can look like, anybody I want, and I can be a virtual Amsterdam hooker, yay,
Well, one of the things that I really liked about it was, well, two things. One was the exploration of the various creations. So you'd get together with a buddy, and it wasn't a date, but it was more like a, hey, let's get together and chat, and then
We
go
spent
see
hours doing that.
Yeah,
You and I. It was
go
fantastic.
go see interesting things.
Yeah.
That was so much fun. That social aspect of it, and then traveling together, that was just so great.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
hopefully we'll
and-
see more focus on the sides that we. I mean, it's not just us, is it? I think there's a lot of people that are in that world.
Oh, I think those places and those activities still exist.
Yeah.
I think there are people who still do that. There was
Yeah.
one, I don't remember what the name of the performer was, and I'm not sure what pronouns to use for this performer, but they did it was a comedy act. Lauren Wayland, is that ring a bell? Is that
Yes, that rings a
the name
bell.
that they went by?
Yes.
And for years, and just attracted as many people as could fit on a sim would come to see these performances. And it was, this kind of glamorous, like, I can't remember the actress's name, but, like a blonde bombshell avatar and this really deep voice guy. And he was so funny. She, pardon me, because I don't know, I don't know what the full story was there, but highly, highly entertaining. Things like that would go on. Or Frank Fox, who we all know.
Oh yeah, Frank was great.
He for years performed. I can't remember the name that he used, the stage name he used, but he would go and live perform music in there. Hathead Rickenbacker, if you remember him from back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
He would do musical performances with people in different places and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I think of Second Life in its heyday, that's what I think of. And I just feel like it's a shame that it doesn't seem like that the marketing people there realize that stuff exists and how unique it was, and maybe still is, that you can do that, gather in a space with other people and experience those things, live activities.
As far as I know, some of those people you just mentioned still perform in
They
Second
probably
Life.
do. Yeah, I haven't been in ages, so I don't know, but I'm sure that they do. Chantal, or someone who's I think is more in touch with it, would know.
Mm-hmm.
Probably knows the names of all these people that I'm completely butchering. But if you're out there, Chantal, drop us a comment or something and correct me. But anyway, yeah, Second Life is extraordinary, even with all its glitches.
Yeah. And still very, very active. And I
think so.
I don't think we've seen the end of it by a long shot.
Yeah.
No.
But
for me, what's attractive about attracting more people in there is that will give Linden the money to address the issues that Ricky's been talking about.
Absolutely. Let's hope it does.
So if we're going to attract people in there, let's attract people that actually want to make things or experience things others have made, and not just
Yeah,
hook up.
absolutely.
That's I'll sign off with my prude rant now. It's not about prudishness. It's just it seems like a waste to me of a
I don't.
platform that is still to this day extraordinary in its capabilities
Well, I
and
don't
feels
understand.
largely untapped.
I don't understand what you have against virtual pets. I think that's a great
I like the
idea.
real
I just
ones.
hate following them around with a virtual baggie to
I
pick up
see.
their virtual droppings. So
It's a good point.
Good
Okay,
one, Phil.
well, I've got another bit of news, which in some ways I think is yet another. Well, how many more nails can there be in this coffin? This is Microsoft and 343 Industries have now finally closed the Halo Xbox 360 online multiplayer servers. So, for fans of the original Red versus Blue long-running Machinima series, which was made by RoosterTeeth in Halo 4, this is, I think, the very final nail of an era. Although it does look like some of the older games are keeping their player customization option open. So, yeah, I just wanted to say
Now,
thanks to Jason Boomer for asking about that one. Consider it mentioned.
now, wait a second, Tracy. Do you ever see those horror films where the climax, they finally kill the monster, right?
Medicu's coming back.
Then the credits come up
Yeah,
and the credits finish and the monster shows up again?
I know.
That's what's going to happen here.
Well, it already did, didn't it, in October? As they released yet another, what was it called? Family Splinters Family? I can't remember.
You
Red
got
versus
me.
Blue, yet another rendition of a spin out from the canon.
Well, it's really nice to see that they're going in new creative directions. You know, Rooster Teeth has always been about being creative
Yeah.
and doing new, exploring new forms and new ideas. You hear that, Rooster Teeth?
Do you know what? Let's look forward to that one.
Well, there's a new Halo game that's just been released, so there's that platform available. That's the monster coming back.
Oh, well, there you go. Of course, they haven't actually done machinima for years, have they? It's been just animation.
Yeah,
Because they gave up on the actual, real gameplay stuff, long time ago. But like I said, I think, the switching off of these servers is a little bit symbolic to a certain generation, of
I want to
which I
go
think
ahead.
a few of our listeners will be some.
I'd like to do a little plug here for Ben Grussi's history podcast that's part of our Completely Machinima. I just finished editing the video for Ben's January history. And what he does is he does a timeline of machinima history for a particular month. So, for example, he'll start in, say, 1996 in January, and then he'll say what the important events occurred in January in 96, 97, 98, and then all the way up to 2006, 2007 before the big machinima.com debacle occurred. And they're really, really interesting. Ben has just, he's been the archivist of machinima. I don't think we've given him enough credit for that.
for more than
Collecting
20 years.
for
Yes,
more than 20 years,
absolutely.
collecting movies, and he's put all of these on archive.org. And he does this information for us. And I just want to thank him for doing that, but also encourage you that if you are any way remotely interested in machinima history, check out his podcast. It usually comes as the last podcast of the month.
Hmm.
Machinima History with Ben Grussi. And thank you, Tracy, for helping produce that as well. But check it out. The first video version of that will go on at the end of this month on our YouTube channel. And I really like it. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. Of course, Ben was
Thank you.
also the co-author on the Pioneers book, and without his
Yes.
archiving specialism, that book would never have been written. So
Yep.
he's an absolute boon to the community, really. I think probably now might be a good time to bring in a question from Matthew Loris, who was Zeke from TMU, who's asked us to reflect on what the differences are between machinima and animation and their approaches when making movies. Is machinima now the same as animation, or is there something still that keeps them apart? And how could you tell the difference between machinima movie versus animation movie? And are the techniques the same when creating these movies? So he's asked a lot of questions in there, but I think it's actually a really interesting point to reflect on that, given a lot of the things that we've been talking about already in this episode. So, shall I start and then you guys pick me up?
Sure.
I just want to start by saying I think that what he's asking is it's Tom Jantal's favorite question.
It is.
What is machinima?
Yeah.
Tom loves, I wish Tom could be on today because he loves talking about that.
Absolutely. You know what? We'll put a link into the interview that I did with Tom, which answers that very question.
Yes.
But let's just be kind of serious for a minute, because I think there's some really important points to be made here.
All right.
The first is, when we go back to the very early definitions of machinima, what we said back then was that it was about using a 3D game environment to create content in real time, what was called machine cinema. And actually it was Hugh Hancock quite early on that added in that word animation, right in the middle of the term. Partly, I have to say, to justify the continued use of the misspelling of the concatenation of those two terms, machinima, machine animation cinema. So it was a cock up all round.
Yeah.
Now, clearly animation can be made in many different ways. Now using techniques, we've had hundreds of different techniques that we've talked about over the years, for animation, stop mo, keyframe, and now even animators are beginning to catch up and use 3D environments. Whereas our definition of machinima, I don't think has really moved on that much. And I think more like what it's about is the rest of the world catching up with the techniques that the pioneers in machinima originally devised. And I think it would be fair to say that the games engines that can be used for machinima have definitely evolved. So if you take, for example, the Unreal Engine, that was really in its early days Unreal Tournament, and now it makes much more of being an open tool rather than a predetermined set of assets and resources. And I think it's worth remembering that a lot of machinima is game-based, which is to say that it is inspired by or informed by specific games in some way. And of course, machinima evolved not least because game-based assets as tool sets were a way to access creative resources in a cost-effective way. So if you think about Unreal and Omniverse and a whole load of other tool sets, they are now freely available to creators, notwithstanding the amount of money that you need to actually have the kit. But for a long time, one of the things that held animation and machinima apart was the distinctive aesthetic. And we've talked about that a lot on this show. The differences between poor quality rendered game outputs rather than sort of higher quality animation outputs. But it's, I think, increasingly hard to tell the difference. And I think it was always going to be the case that that gap would close as games improved their cinematic quality. So I think another distinct difference was the quality of creative storytelling in machinima versus animation. And I think that's a really important point now, because as the games themselves have developed and evolved, we've seen, and we commented on this in our December show, a huge amount of different types of approaches to creating machinima content. And it's continually improving and continually evolving. And next week, when we look at our films, you'll see, yet more different types of machinima than we've reviewed so far on the show. So I think that is something that's really worth kind of reflecting on. So the fact that there are all these different types of approaches to machinima creation. And I don't think you see that in animation. It's definitely not true in animation. But I think it's perhaps worth reflecting on why that's not true. And that takes me back to a comment that Kim Libreri made when Ben and I interviewed him for the Pioneers book. Now, what Kim said was that animators in the movie business that did not go to animation school have a very different way of doing things, which is probably going to upset the whole animation industry. And the example he gave was in creating human expressions. And he said that trained animators tend to create bigger than life performances for their characters, but that self-taught real-time creators tend to make use of the very subtle nuances in human behavior which they've learned over time. Some genuinely real differences, and we're seeing that play out in the, for example, in the say the meta-human set of tools that Unreal are making available. So I think you can now still tell the difference between traditional animation and game-based animation, even though you might find it particularly hard, increasingly hard, I'd say, to tell which game was actually used in the machinima itself. And I think, if anything, machinima remains at the very forefront of pushing boundaries of creative practice, which, taught animation just isn't doing. So there's my 10 cents worth on that one. What do you guys think?
Golly, I don't think I could have put it any better. I mean, there's nothing more you can say. You've encompassed the entire complete answer to the question. The only thing I would say is that I tend to look at it as the difference between amateur. And when I say amateur, I mean the original definition of amateur, not as a derogatory comment like poor craftsmanship. An amateur, which is somebody who has a passion for something, and professional. A professional works in a marketplace in which they have to structure their work according to certain standards and subjects. Animation tends to operate in that realm, which means you learn through hard work how to do certain techniques, and there are acceptable looks for animation. If your animation doesn't look like a Pixar film, then it's not acceptable. You have to redo it until it does. Versus somebody who does an amateur production and is able to do it just the way they want because they want to get the work out. They don't have to spend 2 weeks on 5 minutes of animation. You know what I mean? Like they do at Pixar. It's the difference between doing something for passion and something for profit.
Yeah, well said. I forgot about the money bit of it, but that's so true.
I was thinking what you just said about self-taught animators, and it got me thinking about my own, when I do facial animation myself in my projects, and I am a self-taught animator, and you're absolutely right. I go for the more realistic approach I expect from watching people around me, or if I need to, I'll look in a mirror and sort of copy my own expressions when I'm trying to figure out how to make a character look, rather than the more exaggerated look you would get in a someone who's been trained to do animation. They would do the more exaggerated movements and facial expressions, and I can completely see where that's coming from. And it wasn't actually something I thought about until you just said that. That's just the way I animated faces, and that was it.
Yeah. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, the central element is the real-time quality of the animation. If you look back at when machinima, or originally it was just Quake movies before that term existed, the reason it was attractive to creators is because of that rendering time. If you were to, we're talking about late 90s here. So if you were to try and render out what back then would have been high res, would have been 800 by 600 pixels, roughly 1/4 of the size of HD video that's common on YouTube now. It would take days to render a few minutes of footage. It was excruciating if your computer could even handle it.
Yeah.
It would take days for you to see the finished product. You'd be working in Lightwave or Maya or one of those 3D Studio Max if you could afford it. They were all super expensive. Or maybe you would use, some other tool that was cheap and just a lot harder to use. And you would be working in wireframe views and views that weren't the full. You wouldn't know really how it's going to look until you rendered it. And so even just to render, to see how's this turning out, to render a single frame would take hours. This was the reality of creating computer animation content at that time. So along come video games, who have, unwittingly stumbled right into this technology that not stumbled into, they created this technology where something could be rendered live on the screen, in higher resolution than the videos that we were scraping away to do. And it could be rendered in real time, 30 frames or more a second. It was astonishing. And so early machinima makers, it was all about hacking the infrastructure of that game to get access to that engine. Yes. And I don't care if my character looks like a soldier. It's a dude. It's a humanoid.
Right.
And I can make them do something different, or I can just capture. I can be the camera and someone else can move the guy. I mean, these things we take them for granted now, but it was extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And then along comes id Software and builds in, for a completely different purpose, builds in the ability to record and play back something within the game. So all of a sudden, these things that people had been seeing since the 80s with Demo Scene, which were real-time rendered animations, but done with mathematics and programming, and it was not an easy entry level to do that. You kind of had to be a real nerd to do that, And all of a sudden, here's this game that has abstracted all of that into an interface that anybody could use, really, and all the real-time rendering and all the mathematics. You don't have to know any of that. The game does that, and now I just want to inject my own actions into it. Mm-hmm. So, for people like Hugh Hancock, who were getting involved with it early in those days, Hugh was completely capable, even then, of doing traditional animation. He was completely capable. If he didn't know how to do it, he knew how to talk someone into doing it and being on his team. He knew how to infect someone else with his passion, and he could have got that together and done that. The thing that held him back was real-time rendering. Was traditional rendering. There's just not enough time, It's almost prescient now, given that he was taken from us so early. But back then, what he would say is, I don't have enough years left in my life to make the movies I want to make if this is how I have to make them.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Great.
And then he stumbles into machinima, or Quake movies, as it was called. And all of a sudden, I can produce my movie faster than Pixar can. Not just because they're going for a level of perfection that we aren't, not just because they have millions of dollars worth of employees and animators and engineers all working on this, but because the rendering, even for them, they had to have this farm of servers working on it. And even for Pixar, one frame of the Toy Story movie took days to render for them, with all those millions to throw at it. So that's what made machinima different. And Tracy, you're absolutely right. It's not machinima that's really moved. Yeah. Okay, the games have moved forward. They've evolved. They got more advanced. But it's the entire animation, the entire attitude about computer animation has moved toward the techniques that empower machinima.
Absolutely.
The entire thing has moved that way. Look at Nvidia. Look at Omniverse. Look at what Reallusion has done.
Yeah.
All of these, they see that real-time part and realize now even professionals want that, because they can get the same quality, the high quality as is on The Mandalorian, with a freely available set of tools from Unreal. Mm-hmm. It's astounding.
Yep.
Astounding. So, that's the difference for me as a maker, was always in the technique. And, some of the skill set has changed, for sure. There's more things that you need to know how to do if you want the exact movie you're looking for. You can still do machinima the old-fashioned way, by the way, and it's easier than it's ever been, because now you just capture the footage with a third-party tool. But the skills that matter, which is deciding what in the heck to even produce, and crafting the idea and getting the idea in ship shape before you even fire up an engine, those skills are still the same.
Yeah.
It's just now the possibilities are I don't even know what the limit is now.
Well, I think you've made great points there, Phil. And I think one of the things that I want to emphasize is the attitude.
Yes.
The attitude of the machinima filmmaker is rebellious and personal. It's about community, whereas the attitude of the professional animator is, I'm doing a job.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean they're not creative and they're not passionate about their job, but they're doing a job. Whereas the machinima filmmaker is doing it for a different reason, and there's a certain rebelliousness in it, which is why you find so many satires of parodying the game itself, of turning the game on its head. I just love that about the machinima. It's one of the first things that attracted me.
Absolutely. And the community aspect is absolutely the thing that drew me in as well.
Yep.
So that's a really great question, Matthew. I hope we've given you the answer.
Yeah, it is a good question.
To your question. We really enjoyed tackling that one. Thanks for that.
Yep.
And finally, today, I know we're up to time, but Phil, you've got an update for us as well. Would you like to?
Yeah, mine are super quick. So Rockstar Games has launched their next, let's call it plan to their next public relations plan to attract more users to their games, and that is they've decided to pursue a lawsuit against a group of modders. So we're excited to see what will come to Rockstar Games from that. It's something that we've talked about this how many times, Ricky, of why don't the game companies just sue the users of the games? That's the way.
I've wanted
you want
to
win
sue
hearts
them
and
myself.
minds. That's the way, right?
Yeah, lawsuits.
So and there's a lot of information and misinformation, and honestly, I don't know what's what. But I mean, of course, the lawyers for GTA are saying, well, they stole some, they misappropriated some copyrighted game code, and then the defense is saying they didn't do that. They just documented what was already out there. Tracy, thanks for filling me in on that right before this show. Who knows? To me, the story is the fact that they're actually suing.
Yes.
Very unfortunate. Almost as unfortunate as the re-release of the GTA games themselves. Almost that bad. Not quite that bad, but almost that bad. So we'll keep an eye on that story and let you know of any developments there. And then in lighter news, YouTube announced right near the end of the year that there have now been of videos on YouTube that have Minecraft as the subject or are made with Minecraft or that kind of thing. There have now been a total of 1 trillion views.
Wow.
Of that.
Astonishing.
Which is just amazing. In a separate story, which I didn't link there, it turns out that about 995 billion of those views, people weren't terribly satisfied with what they saw.
Ooh.
No, here's the thing. Minecraft, people who play Minecraft, they love Minecraft. They watch it all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They want to see people doing unique stuff with it. They want to see people building with it. They have a lot of fun with it. There's some of the biggest YouTubers and some of the biggest streamers on Twitch. And to this day, Minecraft, a 15, 16-year-old game now, is still one of the most watched things on all of Twitch.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Well, yes, unbelievable is about it.
Thanks for that, Phil.
So congratulations to Minecraft for that. Or Mojang. That's pretty neat.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Now we've also got a request from Pandora's 3D Films, which is to discuss translating a prose story to a visual medium, like Damien's been doing in his Heir to the Empire series. I think what we're going to do with that is defer to a special episode where Damien...
That sounds like a quick subject. I mean,
it's a great subject.
Ricky, 30 seconds and we're out? I mean,
no, I'm not going to do that because I really want to hear that one myself.
Here's my advice.
I think that's a whole episode right there.
Don't do it. That's my
advice. We should plan for one of the... Maybe for next month. Maybe it'll be a slow news month.
No,
we should plan an episode where we discuss that and we could pull some adaptations as examples because there's been some great ones.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's some really great ones.
Well, I was going to suggest that Damien and Ricky do a special podcast on it because,
I like that even better because I don't have to do anything.
Oh, Christ.
So, good idea.
Sure,
Tracy.
sure.
High
Yeah,
five.
that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Anyway.
Ricky has nothing else to do, so this is perfect.
He's the expert on this.
Just
He's
before the show, he was
many.
like, Phil, I just don't have enough to do in my life.
I know he said that to me too.
Can you give me more to do, please?
And that's our show today, ladies and gentlemen.
Actually, it is. That's it for this episode. So we hope you've enjoyed our coverage of latest news items and the discussion today. Don't forget you can give us some feedback on the usual social channels, or you can contact us directly using the addresses on our website at completelymachinima.com. We'd love to hear more suggestions for things you would like us to cover. And thanks in the meantime to those of you who have taken the time to comment, to Jason, Zeke, or Matthew, Pandora, John. Really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you next episode. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.